Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for day 4 of the Light Wellness Experience workshop. Today, we are going to be talking about positioning and light distribution. There are so many elements to light wellness recipes that are imperative for ensuring their success. The core elements that we discuss are, of course, those absolute values, spectral content within lighting, which means what type of radiant output we're getting from very specific wavelengths of light. In this case, that spectral content that we're focusing on is between 460 and 500 nanometers, or more specifically between 480 to 490. Um, and looking at the time of day that we receive that very specific and important spectral content, right? We discussed yesterday Light Wellness 101, where we took a deeper dive into the lighting metrics, which are the spectral content, looking at the difference between spectrum versus strictly color temperature, which we know is the appearance of light, and that appearance of light happens because of the way spectral wavelengths mix together to create that white light. We talked about intensity, and remember the bucket, right? The higher the intensity of light, the shorter the duration of time you're going to be able or need to receive it to facilitate that circadian response. But also, the lower the intensity of light, the longer you're going to have to receive it. And we know through evidence-based research that as little as 5-foot candles from the vertical plane, right? Remember how light enters your eye, downward angle, vertical face, not straight down, because you have that shading, that natural shading device, your ocular brow, right? And as little as 5-foot candles from the vertical plane can impact a circadian response. And as little as 10-foot candles from a horizontal plane, right? A light coming down from a horizontal plane at an angle can facilitate a circadian response. In fact, as little as 10-foot candles, or around 100 lux, 90 to 100 lux, can suppress your melatonin, can give you 50% of the response that you would need in order to fully suppress your melatonin. And that's from something as high as 100-foot candles to 200-foot candles. So what we've seen in evidence-based research is that, or sorry, not 200, not 100, 1,000-foot candles. So the tests that have come out more recently are showing that you can fully saturate and suppress your melatonin over about a 3 to 6 hour period with 1,000-foot candles. But in that 3 hour period, as little as 10-foot candles, right? 1/10 of that can suppress your melatonin by 50% of what you need. So that's huge. That's a huge finding inside our industry, that we can go from 1,000-foot candles to 10-foot candles, right? 1,000-foot candles is like you're standing outside and it's really, really bright, and you need to go find some shade under a tree or an awning of some sort, or something. 10-foot candles is this: it's sitting comfortably in a lighted space, in your office, in your kitchen, in your bedroom. And so when we start to look at, the intensity of light, that becomes a very important factor inside the light wellness recipe. So remember those key metrics: spectrum at a specific time of day, and then the relative metrics to those absolute metrics are your intensity of light and the duration of time you need to receive it. Right. So both sides of values have an emphasis on timing. Timing is everything. We know that in life, and now we know that in light. Right. So, with that quick review, let's talk about positioning and distribution. When we think about being outside, we can have a very, very bright and intense light output hitting us when we're standing in direct sun. It's a, clear sky day, no clouds. And then we are able to transition from that bright light to a shaded area. There's still going to be a decent amount of light, right? Because light is still present and it can scatter. But at the end of the day, you are getting a very, very high amount of intense lighting if you're standing directly under that sun as a light source without any cloud cover to be able to filter or diffuse that light. The same concept happens when we are in an electrically lit environment. If you're standing under a source that doesn't have some sort of diffusing lens that can scatter the light and make it a little bit more omnidirectional than a straight direct down, then you are getting a much higher intensity of light standing directly underneath that light or within the field beam, right? If we have a wider beam spread on your downlight, especially if you don't have a diffusing lens on it, is going to be much better for your circadian health than if you have a narrow beam spread. So if you see under today's guides section, we have that diagram of how light enters the eye, and that between that 0 to 30 degree angle, we're not really getting any impact on our photoreceptors and thus our circadian response to them. But between 30 degrees and 90 degrees, we are getting a very significant, a high to moderate circadian impact or response from light being entering the eye at that angle. And then underneath that 90-degree mark, we are no longer getting any kind of real effect. So that's why we say daytime wakeful light from above the eye level at a downward angle, and evening sedative light that is not going to suppress our melatonin, will be better suited from below the eye level or in very, very low intensities, less than 5-foot candles, from overhead or from a vertical plane. So really important to remember that from a distribution standpoint, angles matter. And I might be able to share my screen with you on this one. Let me go ahead and pull it up, because I think that actually seeing it's one thing for me to tell you, it's another for you to actually be able to see it. And it really is an important aspect of this conversation altogether. So remember, quick highlight tips: the wider the beam angle of your light, the more positive of an impact you're going to have on your circadian health if you're standing to the sides of it within that field of light. The more narrow the beam spread, the less impact you are going to have on your circadian response. So again, my internet is running a little bit slowly today, so I'm having a little bit trouble pulling things up. But all right, so what does that mean if you're inside your home? Wide beam distribution versus narrow beam distribution, or maybe even out in the world, and we can touch on that too. But inside your home, really what we're looking at is, are you able to bounce a lot of light off of your walls and create reflected light? Or are we able to get a direct impact, right? And then how are we actually going to be able to tune that and adjust that so that we can transition from a daytime wakeful to an evening sedative light wellness profile? So actually, I have this up and running. Let me go ahead and share. Here we go. Okay. So you can see this right here. You can see my whole screen. I've got tons of articles up. But this is what we mean by that effect. So light entering the eye between 30 and 45 degrees is going to have a moderate circadian impact. And between 45 to 90, that vertical plane more so is going to have the highest effect. And then between 0 to 30 or 90 and 180, you're really not going to have too much of an impact. So that's what we mean by how light enters the eye. So how are we actually going to be able to adjust these lights? Well, if you're working with standard downlights inside an apartment or inside your home, chances are you have, unless you've used a lighting designer to install a very specific type of recessed downlight in your ceiling, chances are you're using a very standard run-of-the-mill can light that has a medium screw base par lamp inside of it. You can go to the store and you can purchase from the shelf or off the shelf different par lights of different color temperatures, and think about how you're going to be using that space. When I start looking at how I'm going to position light, where I'm going to be placing a specific light profile, my daytime wakeful versus my evening sedative, I look at how I'm programming my space. Am I going to be spending, because again, a lot of the lights that we put into our home are low level or low light output. They're not going to be like the sun. They're not going to be giving us, 100 to 1,000 foot candles. They're going to be giving us probably closer to 5 to 20 foot candles. And that means that we're using a passive light model where we have a low level of light over a long period of time. So when you're looking at where you need to be putting your daytime wakeful profiles inside your home from an electric lighting standpoint, you want to be looking at spaces throughout the early morning and the early to mid afternoon where you're going to be spending the most amount of time, like 1 to 2 hours minimum. Right. So think about that. And actually, ideally 3 to 4 hours. So think about, okay, throughout my home, and it doesn't have to be the same space. It can be, a collection of spaces where you can stack those light profiles. All right, I'm going to be spending the first hour between my bedroom and my bathroom getting ready. I'm going to spend the next hour between my kitchen and my living room. And then I'm going to spend the next 2 to 4 hours of the day inside my home office, or I'm going to have to go outside and do gardening. Even better, daylight is free. Get you some, right? But think about how you can start stacking those light wellness profiles so that you can get the most impact from low level lighting over a longer duration of time. Um, Maybe you want to stay in bed. Right. I used to have a client who had seasonal affective disorder. He was living far from the equator in a particularly dreary city. And he said he spent most of his mornings sleeping in. He had an evening job. He was a notary during the day and a bartender by night. And he was always really, really tired in the morning. He was battling some seasonal affective depression and wound up laying in bed for the first few hours of the day. After we started working together, I wound up he wound up realizing that, what, I might be able to battle this by laying in bed. If I switch the positioning of my bed so that my bed is directly next to the window, and that way I'm in the primary daylight zone, I'm getting the most impact from, fortunately he had eastern facing windows in his bedroom, so he was restructuring his space so that he would be able to lay in bed, keep his blinds open and his curtains open rather than keep them closed, so that he was still, feeling the dreariness and the fatigue of that morning. And he said, so you're saying that I could potentially just open my blinds, put my bed in front of my window and lay in bed for a few hours, and that might help me feel better over a few weeks? And I said, maybe. There's only one way to be sure. You got to try it. And so he did it. And sure enough, After a few weeks, he felt so much better. He didn't want to stay in bed anymore. He wanted to get out of bed. So instead of laying in bed until about like 11 a.m., he was getting up at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, making himself a smoothie, and he was starting his days off better, and he was ending them on a happier note, and he felt good about going to sleep and waking up. And that's what we want for you. We want you to start looking at how you can start making these kinds of positional adjustments in your home, whether it's swapping out lamping, trying to get a cooler light up in your, recessed down light in a room where you're going to be spending 4 hours for, throughout the first half of your day, to getting a warmer light on a low light, a low level table, or, so that you can get that light as, low between from your eye as possible, or below your eye, as low below your eye as possible, so that you can start allowing melatonin to release so that you can fall asleep a little bit more easily. I can't tell you how many individuals that I've worked with or who I've just spoken to who say, I tossed and turned all night. I was getting ready for bed. I climbed into bed. I turned off my lights, and then I tossed and turned for 3 hours, and it was impossible. My mind was racing. My body was agitated, and I couldn't fall asleep. Then there were other people who were like, my mind wasn't racing. I wasn't agitated. I just couldn't fall asleep. So I turned on the TV, and allowed, and watched a few shows, and eventually wound up drifting off. But the common denominator in all of those individuals was that they had their overhead lights on, or they had ambient light at full brightness and full output on up until the moment that they decided to actually go to sleep. And so they turned off their lights and then got in bed. And it takes, as we know, 2 to 3 hours for melatonin to release and fluctuate through our body. And so it makes total sense that they weren't falling asleep for 2 to 3 hours after they turned off their light, because they had been suppressing their melatonin up until that point. And we need that cue. We need that environmental cue of the lights dimming or going off from above the eye level in order for our body to say, okay, it's time to wind down and go to sleep, right? And so, think about where you are going to be in the evening. Right. If you're planning to watch some TV before you go to bed, that's fine. Right. I know blue light from devices is really, the most detrimental, or only truly detrimental, if it's right in front of your face, because you're getting that blue light at a much higher output the closer that it is, to you. So the proximal distance is going to make a difference. If you have a low output source that's right in front of your face, then it can create anywhere from 5 to 10 foot candles, which over the course of, 1 to 3 hours is going to suppress your melatonin by 50%, right? So you're going to wind up needing an extra 1 to 2 hours just to wind down once you remove that light source from your face. But a TV that is, 5 to 10 feet away from you is going to have much less of an impact. I've taken the readings, and then, not to say that everyone has the same brightness TV, but I put my TV on full brightness. It's like a 60-inch across or something. It's a nice big screen TV, and I'm about 8 to 10 feet away from it. And I wasn't even getting 1 foot candle. I turned off all of the lights in my house, and I did a reading from, right where I was sitting, and it was less than a foot candle. So again, just take it with a grain of salt. Devices at night, always put on your warm filter or your night shift filter. Reduce that light output to as low as you can, that's comfortable, where you're capable of seeing. Try to keep it a nice distance away from your face if you're going to be using them, but don't sweat it if you're, watching TV from 10 feet away in your living room. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I'd be more concerned about the noise input, the sound kind of environment, and the sound cues, and whatever kind of psychological cues you're getting from what you're watching, right? Uh, so yeah, think about at night where you're going to be spending the 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep. Is it in your bedroom? Is it in your kitchen? Is it in your living room? Is it in your children's rooms? And those are the places where you want to be tending to your evening sedative light wellness profiles. Think about where you're going to be in the beginning of the day for, the first 4 hours, of the day, 3 to 6, more specifically. And again, you can stack them, right? We don't live life in one spot for 6 hours at a time. We're constantly moving. And this is what we mean about developing a light conscious lifestyle of how you move throughout spaces, both indoors and out. And throughout the day, and particularly the night, that tends to be more indoors. And if you can get outside, great. But be mindful of that. Be mindful, just like the client I mentioned, of where you're actually positioning things. Maybe you can adjust where the location of your bed is, or where the location of your couch is, or where the location of your desk is, right? My desk is directly in front of a window. If I were to open this window right now, it gets significantly brighter, right? And I'm getting a beautiful amount of natural light. I placed my desk here for a very specific reason, because this window faces east and it's beautiful morning light. And this is where I spend the first 3 hours of my day, if not more, right? And so think about how that is happening for you. Now, remember, you have a post lunch dip, right? Our circadian rhythms actually have a dip in the middle of the day where melatonin increases to give our body a little bit of a rest and cortisol decreases. That is a very normal, natural, and healthy response to a circadian rhythm. So, if you're thinking that in the middle of the day you just got so tired and you're like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep the night before, or I ate too heavy, too carb heavy of a meal, or maybe I'm just getting sick, right? No, I mean, I'm not saying those things aren't true, but also recognize that having that fatigue in the middle of the day, especially if it's happening around the same time every day, right, within that 15 to 30-minute range, or right at the same time, that's really healthy for your circadian health. And you can choose to either lean into that dip and let your body rest, or you can fight it by suppressing your melatonin and going out and getting a nice blast of daylight for about 15 to 20 minutes if you have nice bright light. If you don't have a lot of bright light, for a minimum of an hour, try to make it happen. And so, yeah, I think I don't want to get too heavy into it, but I think those are the biggest things that I can leave you with today, to keep it short and sweet, is when you're looking at how to set up the lighting metrics and the light profiles and the models that we talked about yesterday, really look at where you're going to be living inside your space. I had someone reach out recently on, I believe it was not yesterday, but the day before yesterday's post, saying that they love this information. Was a good friend of mine growing up, and we've maintained contact through social media over the years. And she's loving the workshops, but she works outside 12 to 14 hours a day. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to get too much natural light, and how you can give your body a little bit of a reprieve in order to make sure that you're getting the best rest, that you're maintaining a certain balance of neurotransmitters and hormones that are going to leave you feeling good and rested and in a positive state of mind. Um, you know, Moving into the following day and the day after, right? So think about how you can apply daytime wakeful profiles over the first 3 to 6 hours of your day inside your home. Where are those spaces that you're going to be spending the bulk of that time? And put your daytime wakeful profiles there. Think about where you're going to be spending the last 2 to 3 hours of your day right before you go to sleep, and try to install your evening sedative profiles there. And think about your beam distributions, right? You might have a really nice, cool a white lamp that you're putting in your downlight, but if it has a really narrow distribution, it's not going to be anywhere near as effective on entering into your eye as if you had a wide beam distribution. And I can drop a couple of samples of what that looks like in the guides as well for today. And yeah, join us tomorrow to talk more about the value of investment versus the return on investment, and what that means in terms of health indicators versus financial indicators. So, very much looking forward to wrapping up this program and this workshop on a high note, positive note tomorrow. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Let me know. And yeah, I'm excited. I think that this has been, a good insight into how you can start applying these things that you're learning in real time and in real ways, um, without having to hire an architect or a lighting designer, right? I hope that you are getting that from this workshop. So I would love to work with you in that capacity if you believe that your home needs it after doing these reviews and assessing your space. I am here to help in any way that I can, and at the end of the day, I just want to see all of you be well and find a more happy and holistic lifestyle and healthy lifestyle under light, so that you can live your life to the fullest, so that you can reach your mental, emotional, and physical peaks, so that you can be that much stronger and more resilient for yourself and for those who rely on you. So, yeah, with that said, as always, take care and live lighthearted. And I will see you tomorrow for the last day of this year's first Light Wellness Experience Workshop. Take care.